If you are over 50 and fat loss feels slower than it used to, this video is your step-by-step plan. 5 proven steps, starting with the one most people skip entirely, because here is what nobody is telling you. You may be doing all the things, eating more protein, lifting heavier weights, maybe you are even on hormone replacement therapy and still struggling. But here's the thing, if you are inflamed, dysregulated, and running on a nervous system that has been in survival mode so long your body has forgot what safety actually feels like. Well, a body that doesn't feel safe does not release fat, no matter how hard you try. I'm Jennifer, licensed therapist, strength coach, and functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, and I have worked with over 1,500 women. And these 5 steps are in the exact biological order they need to happen so that fat loss is finally something your body is prepared to do. But the thing is, so many programs start this backwards. And stay with me through step 5, because if you have ever felt a desperation around losing weight that goes beyond just wanting to be healthier, you need to hear what I have to say in that step. Step 1, assess the battlefield and calm your nervous system. Here is what no fat loss program will ever tell you. Before the food plan, before the workout program, before you ever enter a calorie deficit, you have to know what your body is currently fighting. Because if chronic inflammation and nervous system dysregulation is present, no deficit or diet is ever going to work long term. A body under threat, it does not release fat, and those two things keep a body stressed and threatened, making it very difficult to release fat. Dieting first or eating less in the beginning is the wrong thing to do first, but most everyone starts here. I never begin my clients in a calorie deficit. Your nervous system must believe that the threat is over before your body will release stored fat. And I am not talking about doing deep breath work to get there or just managing your anxiety or stress level, because inflammation can cause nervous system dysregulation. And nervous system dysregulation can also cause inflammation. It is a vicious cycle, and both needs to be addressed before a deficit is ever applied. In fact, steps 2, 3, and 4 need to be addressed before a deficit will even work. But women tend to start in a deficit, and maybe they make some short-term progress, but it often does not last. Inflammation is often silently running the show. Most women never hear this word in the context of fat loss. They think of inflamed as feeling puffy, but inflammation distorts every signal your body relies on. Hunger, satiety, insulin sensitivity, and your stress response, all of it. When inflammation is elevated, your body is receiving and sending distorted information, and no amount of discipline overrides distorted information. And then we have stress. Chronic stress keeps cortisol elevated, and then cortisol is keeping you stuck in fat storage. Chronic cortisol elevation can also waste muscle and keep you skinny fat. I spent a few segments of my life in extreme moments such as divorce and grief that I am certain caused significant muscle wasting, because chronic cortisol elevation can also shut down hunger, which is not a good thing, even if you are losing scale weight. Elevated cortisol also tells the body to build visceral fat, specifically in the midsection. This is also the fat most resistant to every protocol you have tried. No diet overcomes a dysregulated stress response. You can be in a calorie deficit and still not lose fat, because calorie restriction is a biological threat signal. For a dysregulated nervous system, cutting calories tells the body danger is here. The body does not respond by releasing fat. It responds by holding fat harder. This is not laziness, this is not weakness, this is just the wrong order. Step 1 has 2 things that need to be addressed at the same time. The first thing is measure what your body is already fighting. I will tell you which labs to speak to your physician about to assess for chronic levels of inflammation. And the second thing is teaching your nervous system that the war is finally over. Most women over 50 have never had these markers checked, and it's not because your doctors don't care or they're not good. It's simply because many of the standard panels, they are not built to catch what is quietly blocking fat loss. You need to know your inflammatory load. The key markers to ask your doctor about are your HS-CRP, which is your high sensitivity C-reactive protein, fasting insulin, your HOMA IR for insulin resistance, sedimentation rate, A1C, and your cortisol pattern. I will write these in the description box below. A continuous glucose monitor can also reveal how stress is showing up in your body as glucose spikes. This sometimes looks like a food craving, but it may actually, in some cases, be a cortisol event. These markers will tell you more about your fat loss readiness than any scale ever will. And also, hunger after 40 is often a signal problem, not always a discipline problem or a food problem. Leptin resistance, insulin dysregulation, and chronic inflammation distort what your body tells your brain about hunger. When you feel out of control around food, when hunger feels relentless, these signals themselves are broken. It's not you that is broken, and you are not failing. You cannot willpower your way through broken signals. You have to fix the signals. So many women carry shame about not being able to control their eating, and this is not a moral failure. This is sometimes a physiology problem. So many people, when they come to find out that their cravings have been blood sugar driven or driven by insulin resistance, and they understand the underlying aspects that are occurring, and then they start to make changes towards it, they're motivated from a different place because they see the data on their labs and they're like, okay, this explains why. It is not just me being weak-willed around food, because then we start to talk to ourselves in our worst voice, right? We think we just have to try harder, we just have to do better. And sometimes there are underlying factors that contribute to this. And then people, what I have seen, okay, they're more motivated then to make certain changes because they begin to see the reflection in the numbers on their labs. Now, the second half of step 1. If you grew up in a high-stress environment, if there was instability, chaos, addiction, or emotional unpredictability in your home, as like mine, your baseline inflammatory markers may be structurally elevated before you ever start a program. Childhood adversity keeps inflammatory markers elevated for decades. Early chronic stress rewires the hormonal system that governs your stress response. This is not weakness. This is epigenetics. Your biology is not broken, and standard calorie restriction doesn't fix this. In fact, it can actually make it worse. And there is one more layer I want to name, and we'll come back to it later in more depth. For some women, the drive to lose weight is not just about health. It is about something older than that, something that has more to do with worthiness than wellness. We will get into that way more in step 5, because understanding why you want to do this whole weight loss thing or change your body and what is underneath that urgency matters as much as any protocol. I grew up in a home of an alcoholic family and hold nothing against my family. I love them dearly. Both my parents are passed on, but as a child, the emotional volatility that was in there, it definitely caused a cyclic effect in my body. I spent most of my years braced in pain. These are the effects of situations like that we often disregard because we say we don't live there anymore. But that's where the book, The Body Keeps the Score, comes from. So if you haven't ever looked into that book, good one to look at. What does regulation actually look like in practice? It looks like making the effort to reduce factors that contribute to inflammation. Things like ultra-processed foods, alcohol, sugary foods, poor sleep, and social isolation, and those unresolved stressors. All of those are inputs, and reducing them matters. Then begin daily vagal tone work. Things like slow extended exhales, humming, gentle rhythmic movements, safe connection with someone, progressive muscle relaxation, or co-regulating with a therapist. These directly suppress inflammatory cytokines. This is why this stuff is so important. And then start to move. Things like 20 minutes of walking daily or cycling 3 times a week produces measurable reductions in inflammatory cytokines. And the rhythmic movement is very calming to your nervous system, like walking. Not because of calories burned or steps counted or any nonsense like that, but because you are sending your body a message that it is capable and safe. That message matters more than the calorie expenditure or restricting food. You know you are ready to leave step 1 when inflammatory markers on those labs are starting to trend down and your nervous system is no longer sending constant threat signals to your body. That is when you move to step 2. The markers tell you when. Your nervous system will tell you when, not a timeline or a calendar. Step 2. Replace your food as your regulation strategy. When the day gets hard, what do you reach for? For a lot of women, the honest answer is food, particularly carbs and fat, or alcohol. That is not weakness. That is a very efficient nervous system doing its job. But if food is your primary regulation tool for managing stress or depression, and we remove it before ever replacing it, we have not created freedom. We have then created destabilization. This is not a willpower problem. This is simply the wrong order of things. Step 2 is about 3 things. Number 1, honestly assessing whether food is functioning as your nervous system regulation strategy. 2, building something to replace it before a restriction or a diet ever enters the picture. Number 3, for the first time, possibly in your entire adult life, find out how much you are actually eating. Not to restrict or judge yourself or criticize yourself, but to get a good assessment of what you are consuming. And the key is without judgment. We have all done it. I know I have. After a long day, I would get home and I'd be wiped out, but I'd have to transition into home life, and I open up my pantry and I stare at it, and there have been plenty of times that I have stood there in the pantry eating handfuls of dried Honey Nut Cheerios. And why? Because my body was sending me a signal. And if I can actually listen to it without criticizing it, if I can listen to it with curiosity, then I can get a little further and understanding what it is that is actually going on. If you are eating to calm down, that is a nervous system regulation problem. It is not a willpower problem. The drive to eat is not random. It is cortisol sometimes looking for relief. Until cortisol has another way to calm down, the drive to eat will stay. Chronic inflammation disrupts serotonin production. Low serotonin means that we have low mood stability, low satiety, and high carbohydrate cravings. Carbohydrates temporarily spike serotonin, which is one reason your body craves them. What looks like poor food choices is your brain solving a serotonin problem, and the only way it knows how to as quickly as possible. This happens especially between 3 and 6 p.m., the witching hour. That is neurochemistry, not a lack of discipline. And the gut matters here too, because when the microbiome is imbalanced, serotonin drops further, cravings spike, and the immune system stays activated. 90% of serotonin is produced in the gut, not the brain. And you cannot restrict your way through a disrupted gut issue. You have to address the terrain. So many clients would say to me that they could not trust themselves around food, especially cookies or chips or bread, those types of things. And they'd start the morning out good, only to be left with uncontrollable cravings and hunger later in the day. A lot of times, the biggest and best solution for this is to front load protein and fiber. This, especially the fiber aspect, helps the gut issue we were just talking about. Consuming 25 to 40 grams of fiber in your day, and I suggest trying to get half of that in before 2 p.m., can have a significant impact on the type of cravings you have later in the day, and you'll find that you'll have a lot more control over them. Especially with protein, aiming to consume your goal body weight in protein and getting half of that in before 2 p.m. can work miracles on those uncontrollable cravings later on in the day. And as I said, the fiber is going to help you tremendously with your gut issues. Now, here is the part that surprises almost every woman I work with. In step 2, we are not cutting calories. We are finding out what you are actually eating, because most women who have struggled for years, they are not eating too much. They are actually eating too little of the most important things. I call it portion distortion. Women on dysfunctional diets for years, who have lived in these diets for years, have often calibrated their intake down to 1,200 to 1,400 calories a day, and they are stuck. their weight is not moving. Not because they are cheating or not trying, because the body has adapted to survive on less. Less capacity, less energy, and less recovery. So in step 2, we measure, weigh, and track. And I know you're rolling your eyes saying, I hate measuring, weighing, and tracking, but hear me out. Do not track to restrict food or to hit numbers. Track from curiosity. How much am I actually eating? How many carbs is in this bowl of oatmeal? How much is this piece of chicken? How much total protein did I get in today? Take time and tally up for a few days and even the weekends. Are you significantly under calorically or over? How much protein are you getting in? How many total carbs and total fat? Then use a total daily energy expenditure calculator to find out what your body needs to maintain its current weight. I'll post a link to one below. I'll put it in the description box. Put in your information and set it to maintenance, not weight loss. And this is very important. Then compare that number to what you had tracked on those other days. How far off are you? Then the goal is to eat at that number, not below it, but at it for at least 12 weeks. This is maintenance eating, and it is the foundation the next steps are built on. If your insulin sensitivity is normal, then you can consume roughly 40 to 50% carbohydrates, 25 to 35% protein, 20 to 30% fats. If step 1, your labs, revealed insulin resistance, carbohydrates come down a bit, protein stays high, and healthy fats can increase. Lastly, fiber, we said this, aim to get in 25 to 40 grams of fiber daily. The goal is the same. Stabilize the system. Give the body evidence that resources are not scarce. This is what helps your nervous system. Every time I ask a client to do this, they have a look of fear on their face. They cannot imagine that if they eat more, they won't gain weight. And every time, not only do they not gain scale weight, they actually begin to lose bloat and puffiness. For women who grew up in homes where food was tied to comfort, chaos, reward, or punishment, restrictive dieting doesn't just trigger cortisol. It actually reactivates old dynamics. The nervous system reads dietary scarcity the same way it read childhood scarcity. And sometimes the desire to control food becomes its own regulation strategy. It becomes the plan, the rules do it, the structure of a diet managing an internal world that feels unsafe. If that resonates, stay with this video. Step 5 is going to address that directly. In order to graduate from step 2, you must have a non-food regulation strategy in place. Tracking is coming from curiosity rather than control and criticism. And also, you must be in maintenance, calories must be established. And then after that point, then you can move on to step 3. Capacity before restriction, regulation before a deficit, restore before restrict. Step 3, sleep as infrastructure. Sleep is not rest. Sleep is where fat loss either happens or doesn't. It is a fat loss variable, the same way calories and training are variables. If you are not treating it that way, you are managing every other variable while ignoring the one that determines whether any of this actually works. This is like driving a car without oil. So when you don't sleep enough, your hunger hormone goes up, your fullness hormone goes down, and your brain receives a famine signal. And a brain receiving a famine signal protects stored fat. The hunger you are fighting at night is not weakness, it is biology. Sleep deprivation is a chronic stress state. Elevated cortisol breaks down muscle tissue overnight, the exact tissue needed to regulate metabolism and create the conditions for fat loss. You cannot build a metabolic floor while the stress response is tearing it down at night. And then there is growth hormone. The majority of your growth hormone is released during deep sleep. Growth hormone is the primary signal for muscle repair, fat mobilization, and cellular regeneration. Without adequate deep sleep, your body does not get the signal to preserve lean tissue or release fat. Step 4 asks you to build muscle. Without sufficient growth hormone, that stimulus goes largely unanswered. Sleep is not the recovery from a long day. Sleep is where work actually happens and where growth can actually take place. What does step 3 require? It requires consistent sleep and consistent wake times. Same time every day, give or take 30 minutes. Morning light exposure within the first 30 to 60 minutes of waking. I have 3 dogs, one of which is a 70-pound, 8-month-old puppy at the time of this video. I walk them every morning at 7 a.m. before I have coffee. This has been the best thing for my sleep. Be sure to also create an evening wind down that signals safety to the nervous system, and that's not scrolling on Instagram. And address what is waking you up at night. Waking up between 2 and 4 a.m., for example, could be a cortisol pattern or often blood sugar instability or elevated evening cortisol. It could also be insufficient estrogen and progesterone. You can be in bed for 8 hours and still not complete the repair cycles that your body requires. Also consider getting a sleep apnea test. This is an extremely unrecognized issue which contributes to metabolic dysfunction. So many women struggle with fat loss when it comes down to it being a sleep issue. You can move past step 3 when sleep is consistent enough to support recovery, when cortisol has a huge window to reset, and when growth hormone has the conditions it needs to be released, which is deep sleep and REM sleep. Because step 4 asks your body to build. A body that is not sleeping, it cannot build. It can only break down. Now you're in step 4. Build the metabolic floor. Most women come to fat loss thinking the goal is to get smaller, and the muscle piece is not always a priority in their mind. They just want to know that the scale is going down and that they weigh less. But I have to say this is faulty thinking. Here is why. Muscle is your metabolic floor. Without it, intentional fat loss, it does not just take fat. It then takes lean tissue with it. And after 40, you do not easily reclaim it at all. Every cycle of restriction without resistance training lowers the floor. You will pay the piper at some point for constant weight cycling. Less muscle, slower metabolism, and more difficulty the next time you try to lose weight. This is a biological problem compounding over the years. The solution is not more restriction. It is building the floor that restriction has been quietly removing. Resistance training is not the reward you earn after fat loss. It is the intervention that makes fat loss physiologically possible. It rebuilds the metabolic floor, it clears glucose, it reduces inflammation, and signals safety to the nervous system, all at the same time. There is no other tool in this protocol that does all of that simultaneously. This is not about being a bodybuilder or a CrossFit athlete. Forget all that. It's not necessary. When your muscles contract under load, they release very important chemical messengers that directly lower the inflammation we have been addressing since step 1. Do you see a pattern in this? This is why I call strength training anti-inflammatory medicine. A woman who lifts consistently, even modestly, will outperform a woman doing intense sporadic training every single time. The body needs the signal regularly, not perfectly, but regularly. Resistance training sends the directive, protein supplies the raw material to answer it. Both are non-negotiable, not one or the other. You need both. In regards to weight training, skill before intensity every time. Women who jump into loading before developing the neuromuscular connection to the muscles they are training are compensating, often loading joints instead of muscles, causing more inflammation, reinforcing inefficient patterns. I have worked with women who have been lifting for years and still did not feel their glutes fire. That is a neuromuscular connection and a biomechanical problem, not a strength problem. Loading on top of a disconnected pattern does not fix it. Putting more weight on doesn't fix it. It just reinforces it. So skill first, load second, and intensity third. Since the whole women need to lift heavy dogma that has been out, I have more clients, new clients that come into the studio injured from trying to lift heavy. Your body has to learn how to handle that type of load before you put on intensity. Check out my beginner playlist to better understand what I mean. The fitness industry has a way of making all of this look so simple. Don't let it make you feel like you are not athletic enough. So, steps 1, 2, and 3 removed the obstacles. Step 4 builds muscle. Without muscle deficit, a diet produces deterioration. With muscle, a diet produces fat loss. The difference is preparation for this phase. In order to progress from step 4 to step 5, you need muscle mass to be constantly active or being maintained or being built. Protein has to be consistent every single day, a consistent, adequate amount. Your ability to recover has to be sufficient enough to support a deficit without the system breaking down. I suggest taking 6 months to a full year to stay in the phase of building muscle without trying to lose weight. Do not worry, your body will change, I promise. The scale may not, but your body will. I have had many clients gain muscle at the exact same rate that they were losing fat within this time frame. Their rate of muscle gain kept up with their rate of fat loss, and they look extremely different. Muscle is not the aesthetic goal, but muscle is the mechanism that you need. You have to build it first, and then everything else follows. Step 5, intentional fat loss. Here we are. You made it to step 5. At this point, inflammatory load is now lowered. Food regulation is way healthier. You're not using food as a tool. Sleep is doing its job. You have built muscle, right? Now you have muscle on your body. Your body is no longer in survival mode. Now, and only now, we introduce a caloric deficit. This is the step most programs start with, and people aren't ready for it. And that is the mistake. I save it for last. A deficit applied to a dysregulated system produces deterioration. A deficit applied to a prepared system produces fat loss. Same tool, completely different outcome, depending entirely on what came before it. A deficit is not a permanent state. Women enter a deficit with no exit strategy. They cut calories indefinitely until they realize they are half on or half off this program. And then they get down on themselves for not sticking to it. You're not going to do that. That's not what's going to happen. That's not a plan. Here is what structure looks like. You're going to choose a window, 2 weeks, 4 weeks minimum, 12 weeks maximum. This is your fat loss phase. After that, you return to maintenance. You reassess, rebuild muscle if needed, and then you decide whether you want to run another fat loss phase, and you plan the timing deliberately. Not going into the holidays, not before a vacation, not when you drop your firstborn off at college, not during a high-stress season like moving. None of that. You plan out your phase. A deficit is an additional demand on your system. Choose a time frame where your environment is stable, and then during that time you can actually focus. Okay, this is not perfectionism. This is just setting yourself up for success. Your calorie deficit should be modest. Slow fat loss preserves lean mass. Rapid fat loss takes lean tissue with it, and you spent all that time building it. In step 4, this is like building up your Roth IRA and spending it on some cheap cruise and a camper at the age of 55. 0.5% to 1% of your total body weight per week to lose. It's not slow. That is actually the rate that protects muscle while losing fat. Faster than that, lean tissue can go with it. So if you weigh 200 pounds, losing 1 to 2 pounds per week is considered more than adequate. Don't expect 5 pounds per week. Protein is non-negotiable during this time, and this is not for aesthetics, this is for brain chemistry. Neurotransmitters are built from protein. When protein drops, mood destabilizes, decision-making suffers, hunger regulation breaks down. Maintain protein at the level established in step 4. You can even increase it slightly for added lean tissue protection. This determines whether the deficit takes fat or takes muscle. The scale is not a health metric either. Weight loss is not the same thing as metabolic repair. Smaller and weighing less can mean more depletion. So track your strength, energy, sleep quality, and your lab markers, not just the weight. If strength is dropping significantly, the deficit is likely too aggressive. If sleep is deteriorating, the system that you are running under is creating too much stress. The markers tell the truth. I tend to do deficit phases during February, March, and April because my life is very boring during this time. Not because I care about summer coming, but because it's just a very dull time in my life and I typically don't go anywhere during this time, so it's easy for me to stay consistent and focused. My other time frame sometimes is September, October, November, because that's another time frame that I typically don't go a lot of places. I don't have holidays interrupting me or summer vacations. And if fat loss stalls before cutting calories further, go back to the markers. The answer may not be more restriction. It is almost always something upstream. Inflammation creeping back in possibly, or sleep falling apart, or not getting your protein in. Address what is upstream. Then fat loss follows. Now I want to come back to what I mentioned in steps 1 and 2. Sometimes the hardest part of step 5 is not the deficit itself. It is the urge to stay in it, or to enter it before the body is ready. The desperation or urgency to lose weight can be so loud it overrides everything the previous steps built. That urge is information. It is not motivation, and it is not readiness. In many cases, that level of desperation is itself a nervous system signal that can be connected to body dysmorphia or to feelings of worthlessness attached to body size. Or it can be the need to control your body when everything else in life feels out of control. And sometimes the restriction itself is the regulation strategy for people, not the food, but the control of the food, the rules, the structure of a diet, managing an internal world that feels unsafe. This is not a fat loss strategy. This is a survival strategy, wearing the disguise of fat loss, and it will undermine the process every single time. That is a full conversation for a whole other video, but if you recognized yourself in step 1 or step 2 in regards to that, the urgency you feel around your body is worth understanding, not judging, not pushing through, okay? Understanding with compassion. A deficit entered from desperation is not the same as a deficit entered from preparation. The biology responds differently to each. 12 weeks maximum of a deficit, then return to maintenance and reassess the data from there. Not frustration, not desperation. Decide whether another focused phase makes sense. You were not failing because you lack discipline. You were attempting step 5 before you did steps 1, 2, 3, and 4. Cutting calories in a body that's inflamed, dysregulated, underslept, and undermuscled, and your body responded the only way it knew how. It held on. That was never betrayal. That was protection. The sequence changes what your body is capable of, not because it is a better diet, because it addresses the biology that was blocking the outcome the entire time. Safety before a deficit always, capacity before intensity. A metabolic floor before a deficit. That is the order. And when the order is right, the body responds. I hope this video helped you. I know it sounds overwhelming and it sounds like a lot, but I promise you, you will spend less time if you actually do these steps in order before you rush to try to lose weight. I have seen people make amazing progress in a short period of time when they actually did these steps. And I'll link to some of those videos up in this description above. You'll have a link to some of those case studies. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask, and please share this video with someone who needs to hear it.